I'm Lily, a 32-year-old woman who believed in the warmth of love and the promise of a shared future. My husband, Ethan, was once the sun in my sky, but over the years, his light has dimmed, leaving me in a growing chill of neglect and harsh words. It started subtly, a missed dinner here, a harsh word there. But then it became our norm. His once tender glances turned cold, and his touches, which used to spark joy, became rare and perfunctory. One particularly cold evening, I was attempting to bridge the distance that had formed between us, setting up a nice dinner hoping to recapture some of our old warmth. "Ethan, dinner's ready," I called out, trying to inject some cheer into my voice. He walked in, his eyes scanning the table, not a flicker of appreciation in his gaze. "You know I don't like salmon," he muttered, his words clipped. "But you used to love it," I replied, the hurt clear in my voice. He shrugged, dismissing my effort and the memories attached to it. "That was then. Can't you do anything right, Lily?" His words stung, each one a reminder of how far we drifted. I bit my lip, holding back tears, as I watched him eat in silence, his indifference a stark contrast to the love-filled meals we once shared. After dinner, as I was cleaning up, the weight of his growing disdain and blame became too much to bear silently. "Why do you treat me this way, Ethan? What happened to us?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He scoffed, standing up to leave the room. "Maybe if you weren't so barren, things would be different. You're just not enough, Lily. Not as a wife, not as a woman." His cruel words echoed in the now empty room, each syllable etched painfully into my heart. I was left alone, with the remnants of a dinner that tasted of lost love and broken dreams. That night, as I lay in bed, Ethan's presence beside me felt like miles apart. I turned away, my silent tears a testament to the cold shift that had taken over our lives. It was clear that I was alone in my pain, my longing for a child turned into a weapon of blame and shame. The next day, I confided in my diary, the only place I felt safe to express my deepest fears and sorrows. "He doesn't see me anymore, doesn't hear me. I'm just a shadow in my own home, a ghost of the woman I used to be." The evening of the family dinner arrived with a tension I could almost taste. Ethan's parents, Mary and George, had always treated me with kindness, a stark contrast to their son's recent coldness. As we gathered around the dining table, the air was filled with the clinking of cutlery and the simmering undercurrent of unspoken issues. George, ever the patriarch, raised his glass to toast. "To family," he declared with a warm smile. "To family," we echoed, our voices a chorus of varying emotions. As the dinner progressed, the conversation drifted to the topic I dreaded most, children. George, with his usual bluntness, broached the subject. "For years, Ethan, Lily. We were hoping for a grandchild to spoil by now." Ethan's mother, Mary, chimed in, her voice gentle yet firm. "Perhaps it's time to consider seeing a specialist. There could be many reasons for not conceiving, and it's best to understand them." I felt Ethan's gaze on me, his eyes like ice. "We know the reason, don't we, Lily?" "It's her," he said, his voice dripping with accusation. The words stung, more so under the concerned gaze of his parents. "It's not just about me, Ethan. It takes two, you know," I replied, my voice steady but my hands trembling under the table. Mary, with her medical background, sensed the tension. "Then it's settled. Both of you will go for a checkup. It's the only way to know for sure," she stated, a note of finality in her voice. Ethan laughed, a hollow sound that didn't reach his eyes. "Sure, we'll go. But we already know the answer, don't we?" Later that evening, as Ethan and I cleaned up in silence, the weight of the situation bore down on me. The idea of the medical examinations loomed large, a beacon of hope and a source of dread all at once. "Ethan," I started, breaking the silence, "I'm scared. What if there's really something wrong with me?" He didn't look at me, his focus on the dishes in the sink. "Then we'll know, won't we? Better than living in denial." His words were meant to be dismissive, but I caught the flicker of something else in his voice. "Fear?" Uncertainty? It was hard to tell. As I went to bed that night, the house felt colder than ever. The uncertainty of the coming days was a heavy blanket, smothering the last embers of warmth between us. Yet, despite everything, a part of me clung to the hope that the tests might lead to a solution, a way forward out of this stagnant bitterness. The days following our medical examinations were some of the longest of my life. As I awaited the results, my thoughts constantly circled back to what they might reveal, to the myriad of ways they could impact our already strained relationship. Ethan, however, seemed more irritable than anxious, his patience wearing thinner with each passing day. One afternoon, as I sat lost in thought, Ethan stormed into the room, his face twisted with annoyance. "Look at this place, Lily. It's a mess. You're so caught up in your own head, you've let the house go." Before I could respond, he grabbed my hand and practically dragged me into his office. "Start here. I want every surface clean, especially my desk. I can't work in this filth." His words stung, but I bit my tongue and began to clean, my motions mechanical as I tried to suppress the hurt and confusion swirling inside me. As I moved to dust his desk, my hand accidentally caught the edge of a folder, sending it tumbling to the floor, papers spilling out in a chaotic cascade. I knelt to gather them, apologizing under my breath, but as I started to put them back, my eyes caught on the contents. There were medical insurance papers, hospital receipts for childbirth, all paid for by Ethan. A name I didn't recognize, likely the mother, was listed, along with a date not too far in the past. The truth hit me like a physical blow: Ethan had a child with another woman. My heart pounded, a mix of shock, betrayal, and a deep, searing pain coursing through me. But I knew I couldn't confront him, not yet. I needed to be smart, to gather evidence and plan my next steps carefully. Once I was sure Ethan was occupied elsewhere, I quickly copied all the documents, my hands shaking as I worked. Each copy was a silent confirmation of the lies and deceit that had infiltrated our marriage, of the double life Ethan had been leading right under my nose. As I tucked the copies away in a safe place, a strange sense of calm settled over me. The hurt was still there, a dull, persistent ache, but it was now accompanied by a clarity of purpose. I wouldn't let Ethan get away with this betrayal. I would bide my time, wait for the right moment to reveal everything. For the rest of the day, I moved through the house like a shadow, performing my chores with a mechanical efficiency. Ethan remained oblivious, wrapped up in his own affairs, unaware of the storm brewing just beneath the surface. That night, as I lay in bed, Ethan's breathing steady and even beside me, I couldn't help but wonder how many other nights he'd shared with another, how many lies he'd told to cover his tracks. The pain was almost unbearable, but it was also a catalyst, transforming my sadness and despair into a quiet, burning resolve. I didn't know what the future would hold, but one thing was clear: I wouldn't be the silent, suffering wife any longer. I would confront Ethan, confront the truth, no matter how painful it might be. The wait for the examination results was still there, a looming question mark in our lives, but it was no longer the only thing defining my existence. I had a plan, a purpose, and I would see it through to the end. No more waiting, no more wondering. It was time to act. As Ethan's birthday unfolded, the house buzzed with the hum of conversation and laughter, a stark contrast to the storm brewing within me. I circulated among the guests, a smile plastered on my face, my heart racing with the anticipation of the revelation to come. When it was time for Ethan to open his gifts, the room filled with the rustle of wrapping paper and appreciative murmurs. Finally, it was my turn. I handed him a neatly wrapped box, my hand steady, my resolve firm. "Happy birthday, Ethan," I said, my voice betraying none of my inner turmoil. He accepted it with a confident smirk, perhaps expecting something mundane, something that would affirm the facade of our marriage. But as he lifted the lid and his eyes scanned the contents, his expression morphed from smug assurance to utter shock. "What's this?" he stammered, his voice faltering as he held up the documents for the room to see. "It's the truth," I said simply, standing firm amidst the sudden wave of tension that swept through the room. The guests leaned in, a collective intake of breath filling the space as they tried to make sense of the scene unfolding before them. Ethan's mother, Mary, took the papers from his trembling hands, her eyes widening as she read the details spelled out on the page. "Ethan, is this true? Do you have a child with another woman?" Her voice was a mix of disbelief and rising anger. Ethan's face turned pale, his usual composure shattered. "It's not how it looks, I can explain." He fumbled with the papers, his gaze darting around the room, desperately seeking an ally. But there was no respite to be found. The guests murmured among themselves, the air thick with judgment and shock. Ethan's father, George, stood up, his face a mask of disappointment and rage. "Explain? How could you do this, not just to Lily, but to all of us? We're your family." His voice boomed, cutting through the whispers like a knife. Ethan opened his mouth to respond, but no words came. He looked around at the faces of friends and family, at the disillusionment and accusation reflected back at him. The room, once filled with the warmth of celebration, now felt cold, the air heavy with betrayal. I watched him, feeling a mixture of vindication and sorrow. "Everyone, I'm sorry you had to find out this way, but I thought it was time the truth came out," I said, addressing the room. The guests remained in place, the celebration forgotten, as the gravity of the situation settled upon us all. No one moved to leave, the shock of the revelation rooting them to the spot. The festive atmosphere had been irrevocably tainted, the joy of the occasion turned to ash. Ethan looked around, his eyes meeting mine, and in that moment, I saw the realization of the consequences of his actions dawn upon him. The room stayed silent, the tension palpable, as we all waited for what would come next. The revelation had been made, and now, there was no turning back. As the room's shock over the initial revelation began to settle, I knew it was time to deliver the final blow. Ethan, pale and shaken from the fallout of his exposed secrets, was still grasping at strangled threads of dignity when I stepped forward, holding another set of documents. "Ethan," I began, my voice clear and unwavering, "there's more you need to know." I handed him the envelope containing the medical results we'd both been anxiously awaiting. The room, already thick with tension, seemed to hold its breath as Ethan's hands trembled slightly while opening it. His eyes scanned the contents, and the color completely drained from his face, leaving him ghostly pale. "What is it, Ethan? What does it say?" his mother, Mary, demanded, her voice sharp with concern and growing anger. He couldn't speak, couldn't even lift his gaze from the paper that spelled out a truth so ironic it was almost poetic. He was the one who was infertile. I spoke up, filling the heavy silence. "The tests show that Ethan is infertile. It's not me who's been unable to conceive." The revelation hit the room like a physical force. Whispers erupted among the guests, a mix of sympathy for me and disbelief at Ethan's situation. His parents, Mary and George, looked from the papers to their son with expressions that morphed from shock to anger. "Infertile? But you blamed Lily all this time." Mary's voice cracked, her disappointment palpable. George stood, his disappointment hardening into a cold fury. "You've not only been unfaithful and lied to us all, but you dared to shame and blame Lily for something that was your own issue." The accusations flew, thick and fast, each one landing like a blow. Ethan's facade of control shattered completely, leaving behind a man I barely recognized. He was no longer the confident, sometimes arrogant person I had married. Instead, he was small, exposed, and undeniably alone. "But I didn't know," he stammered, his voice barely a whisper against the storm of condemnation. "It doesn't matter if you knew or not," George boomed, his voice resonating with finality. "You've deceived everyone here, most of all Lily." The room buzzed with the weight of betrayal and deceit. Ethan's life, once so orderly and controlled, was unraveling before our very eyes. His once loving parents now looked at him with eyes filled with something akin to strangers' disdain. As the room processed the news, Ethan's mother, Mary, turned to him with a mixture of anger and disbelief. "Ethan, if you're infertile, then who is the father of your mistress's child?" The question hung in the air, heavy and ominous. Ethan's shock was apparent, his face contorting into an expression of disbelief and betrayal. I don't know. I never. I never considered she might be cheating on me too. The admission sent a ripple through the room, the guests exchanging looks of disbelief and pity. George, Ethan's father, stood up, his stature commanding the attention of everyone present. "You've been deceived, son, just as you've deceived us all." It's a bitter irony that's hard to swallow. The accusations continued to fly, each word a nail in the coffin of Ethan's once neatly arranged life. His parents, once his staunchest supporters, now looked at him with eyes filled with disappointment and a deep, unspoken sadness. They had lost a grandson they thought they had and were now grappling with the reality of their son's deceit and the complexities of his betrayal. As the gravity of the situation sank in, Ethan seemed to crumble, his usual arrogance and control evaporating into the charged air of the room. I need to figure this out. I need to understand what's happened," he murmured, more to himself than anyone else. The guests began to leave, the atmosphere too charged with anger and disillusionment to bear. Ethan's parents remained, their expressions grim and thoughtful, a stark contrast to the joy and celebration that had marked the beginning of the evening. The room emptied until it was just Ethan, his parents, and me. The silence that followed was a testament to the broken relationships and trust that lay in tatters around us. Ethan's world had come crashing down, and as he sat there, head in his hands, it was clear that the journey ahead would be a difficult one, filled with introspection, legal battles, and the daunting task of rebuilding his shattered life. For me, the revelation of the medical results was a vindication of sorts, but it was also a reminder of the complex web of lies and deceit that had ensnared us all. As I looked around the room, at the faces of those I had once considered family, I knew that while this chapter was closing, the story was far from over. There were questions to be answered, wounds to heal, and a new path to forge. The tables had turned, indeed, but the full extent of the fallout was yet to be realized. The dust had barely settled after the revelations of Ethan's birthday when I found myself navigating the aftermath of our shattered marriage. The house, once filled with shared dreams and laughter, now echoed with the heavy silence of our broken vows. Ethan, a mere shadow of the man I once knew, tried to approach me the morning after, his eyes rimmed with red, a mix of sleeplessness and perhaps regret. "Lily," he started, his voice hoarse. I don't even know what to say." "What is there to say, Ethan?" I replied, my voice steady, a stark contrast to the turmoil inside. "The truth is out. There's no taking it back." He ran a hand through his hair, a familiar gesture that now seemed foreign. "I know I've messed up, more than I can ever fix. But I was scared, Lily. Scared of what it meant to be infertile, to not be able to give us, what we wanted." I sighed, feeling the weight of his words, yet unable to fully comprehend the depth of his deceit. "Being scared doesn't excuse your actions, Ethan. You lied, you cheated, and you hurt everyone around you, especially me." He nodded, the fight seemingly gone from him. "I know. And I'll do whatever it takes to make it right, if not for us, then for my own conscience." The room grew quiet, the air between us thick with unsaid words and unresolved pain. I knew that the path ahead was one I would have to walk alone, the trust and love we once shared now just remnants of a past life. In the days that followed, I took action. I met with lawyers, collected the necessary documents, and filed for divorce. Each step felt like a liberation, a reclaiming of the dignity and respect I had lost in the shadow of Ethan's betrayal. The legal proceedings were a blur, a series of meetings and signatures that dissolved the life we had built together. Ethan didn't fight it, his compliance a small solace in the storm of our separation. As I walked out of the lawyer's office, the final papers in hand, I felt a mix of relief and sorrow. My marriage was over, the dreams we shared irreparably damaged. Yet, I also felt a spark of hope, a sense that from the ashes of this ordeal, a new, stronger Lily was emerging. The community, once so integral to our lives, watched from a distance, their whispers and pitying glances a constant reminder of the scandal that had unfolded. But among the murmurs, I also found support, friends and neighbors reaching out with offers of help and words of encouragement. One afternoon, as I sat in the garden, the sun warming my face, Mary came to visit. Her eyes were kind, but I saw the hurt that still lingered there. Lily, I just want you to know, we don't blame you. You've handled this with more grace than anyone could expect, she said, taking my hand in hers. I looked at her, the woman who had been like a mother to me, and felt a pang of shared loss. Thank you, Mary. I just wish things could have been different. She squeezed my hand, a silent acknowledgement of the complex tangle of emotions that surrounded us. You'll always be part of this family, Lily. No matter what. The conversation lingered in the air long after she left, a bittersweet reminder of the ties that still bound me to the life I was leaving behind. As I packed up my belongings, each object a memory of the life Ethan and I had shared, I realized that this wasn't just an end, it was also a beginning. A chance to rebuild, to rediscover who I was outside the shadow of my marriage. And as I turned the key in the lock one last time, leaving behind the house that had been my home, I knew that this wasn't just a farewell. It was a declaration of independence, a first step into a future that, while uncertain, was entirely my own. The finality of signing the divorce papers was both liberating and somber. I had filed for divorce from Ethan, demanding compensation for the emotional turmoil and betrayal he caused. My lawyer, a competent and empathetic woman, assured me that the evidence I gathered made a strong case for a substantial settlement. Ethan, on the other hand, found himself entangled not only in our divorce but also in a legal battle with the mistress who had deceived him. He had spent a fortune on medical expenses and supporting the child he believed was his, only to discover the web of lies that had ensnared him. Now, he was suing her, trying to recoup some of his losses and salvage what little dignity he had left. I watched from a distance as Ethan's once controlled and proud life unraveled. There was no joy in seeing him brought so low, but neither was there pity. He had made his choices, and now he was facing the consequences. The man I once loved had become a stranger, one whose fate no longer stirred any emotion in me other than a detached acknowledgement that justice, in its own way, was being served. As for me, I was busy building a new life. The settlement from the divorce provided a financial cushion that allowed me some peace of mind. I moved into a new place, smaller and cozier than the house I shared with Ethan, a place that quickly started to feel like home. It was my sanctuary, filled with my things, decorated to my taste, a visual representation of my newfound independence. I often sat in my new living room, a cup of tea in hand, reflecting on the tumultuous journey I had undergone. The tears and heartache felt like a distant memory, and in their place was a growing sense of self-awareness and strength. I had survived the worst of storms, and now relished the calm that followed. Friends and family were a constant source of support, their love and care helping to mend the parts of me that were broken by Ethan's betrayal. They cheered me on as I took the first tentative steps into a future that was entirely my own, unshaded by the expectations or failings of another. In the end, I found that I didn't need revenge or to see Ethan suffer. My greatest triumph was in reclaiming my life, in proving to myself that I could move past the pain and emerge stronger and more resilient. The wounds he inflicted would always be part of my story, but they no longer defined me. Instead, they were a testament to my ability to overcome and to thrive, despite the odds. As I closed this chapter of my life, I felt a profound sense of closure and optimism. The journey ahead was mine alone, filled with opportunities and experiences waiting to be discovered. And as I stepped out each day, I did so with a lighter heart and a certainty that no matter what the future held, I was ready for it, stronger and wiser than ever before. Ethan was a chapter closed, a lesson learned, and now it was time to write new stories, ones filled with hope, growth, and the promise of a better tomorrow.
All right, everyone's presentations are done. Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. "Nick, is something wrong?" Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my 2nd year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, I'm thirsty. Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children, with zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job, having joined the company wanting to do customer service. I don't care what they say, I plan to quit anytime, he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance. As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. All right, everyone's presentations are done. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me. There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. Still here? Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. I'm leaving. I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! What's wrong? Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself, had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, "Yes. That's Nick for you." Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, "I'm very sorry." Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, "Get his boss here immediately." It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. "What is that idiot doing?" "All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next." Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. "If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you." I obediently followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was, as the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. "Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize." Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. "What kind of training are you giving your subordinates?" Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed, I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry." Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, "I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong." "Mike, what have you done?" Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. "I didn't do anything wrong." "You're still saying that? Look at him." Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. "I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract?" Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. "Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go." Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. "Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him." There's no way he was pushed aside. "Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he?" I don't remember that part." I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you've failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.